Hello and welcome to the Paranormalist Podcast. I am your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist, Patty Wilson. Patty, how are you?
I'm doing okay today. It finally stopped raining.
We didn't have a lot of rain here, but we did have some.
It started somewhere in the middle of the night for us, and it's been raining until about an hour ago. I don't mind the rain. It was a good day to do research.
That sounds like a plan. So hopefully you're all ready for us. We would like to thank everyone who is just joining us for the first time. We really appreciate you. Thank you for coming along. If you would be so kind as to click the subscribe, click the like and the bell. Everything about our podcast is in the description, whether it be our Facebook groups or email address or any other means to contact us. And we do appreciate your feedback and comments. We've had some recently. We tried to address all of those as we can. And again, just so you know that it goes from you to me to Patty, and then it goes from Patty to me back to you. So unless it's on a Facebook group, which then she can reply directly. So. But with that, I think I'm done. And what will be our topic for today?
Magic, real magic. So I want to propose for this podcast today that we consider something I rarely talk about, and that's that magic and the supernatural are more than folklore. They are something very different. Now, I've studied magic and witchcraft and Satanism and arcane religions for most of my life. I don't study them because I'm fascinated with them or because I want to learn how to use them in my own life. I absolutely do not want any part of that. I study because as a Christian, have come to understand that the age of rationality has blinded us to the truth that many of the tropes and the stereotypes that we hear about exist because they were actually true. That in some respect, they made sense and worked. We take everything with it and put a veneer of science over it today. Use it like it's an invocation to banish the arcane, but we don't banish it. What we do is we blind ourselves to it, and because it couldn't possibly be true, it's not a rational thing. It's not a rational age. So today I'm challenging everybody to consider that there might be a grain of truth in a great deal of this. Now, I found a lot of magical stories and superstitions and folklore, and I'm going to juxtaposition them from the historical perspective to the modern perspective. And I think that this is a fascinating study. I've been working on this for quite a while, guys, and there are literally dozens and dozens of different types of magic. And in order for you to open your mind, I want to share one thing. Anybody who's ever watched the movie The Serpent and the Rainbow or read the book would know that it's about a man who goes to Haiti to look for any truth or medicate about the concept of how does one become a zombie. He's being sent by a drug company to see if there's anything to it, because the drug companies know that a lot of times, along with the superstition and the hocus pocus, there's a true element. And they're wondering if there's a medication that might be used as an anesthetic or something like that. So he goes with that 21st century or 20th century mindset and the whisper of the word science to countermand anything else. But what truly happens to him, both in the book, both in the movie, and the book is based on the true story of this man and his encounters, is that he meets both the folklore, witches, beings that come at him in spirit, in dream, in hallucinations, even when he doesn't deliberately take anything. And he finds that there is a real component to it. So basically, the one of the takeaways from the book is that the magicians who make the zombies use pufferfish poison to incapacitate and make a person appear to be dead, and that they then dig them up after they're buried, or fake the burial, or in some way convince the family that this person's being buried. And then they keep them on the pufferfish poison, which makes him compliant and zombie-like. And he thinks at the end that he has solved all of that. And he's got the idea of the medicine, which, by the way, doesn't turn out to be something they can use as an anesthetic. And he goes back to the Western world, to society, and he's talking about his adventures, and he's kind of left out the supernatural component of it, because it's something you don't want to say in a dinner that's being held for you, in which all of your bosses and the bigwigs who are financing this drug company are sitting. So he kind of mellows that out, and he admits that maybe somebody might have drugged him a little tiny bit, but he's back in civilization. He feels absolutely secure until during the dinner he sees the witch doctor who had been the one who he was pursuing on the island in Haiti, standing there laughing at him, and a snake climbing up the table at him. He was completely lucid. He was not in that world. There's no way anybody slipped anything into his glass of water or wine or whatever he's drinking. It was him realizing that something came beyond silence. And so that's where we're going to start today. I want to talk about something called spirit pots or nagas. It's kind of death magic, although it's used for other things as well. The first story is from the late 19th century, so the 1800s. The old man in the Lower Congo used to say that the spirit pot was not a thing you owned. It was the thing that owned you. They said that the pot breathed when no one was looking, that the spirit inside listened to every word spoken in its presence. In the villages along the Kulal River, people believed that the dead could be bound into clay, to bone, or to iron, and that if you fed them properly, blood, smoke, and wine, they would fight for you. Mabala was not a sorcerer by trade. He was a war leader, a man who had seen many raids, too many betrayals, too many nights when the forest swallowed men whole. He inherited his naga from his grandfather, a warrior who had died with a spear in his hand. The pot was made of clay, sealed with resin, wrapped in leopard skin, and inside were the bones of the old man, his grandfather. Small pieces taken from the burial mound before the soil settled. There were iron nails hammered in during oaths, grave dirt scraped from the edge of his grandfather's grave, and a carved wooden figure with a face that was half human and half animal. When Mabala first opened the pot, he found a spearhead inside. It was stained dark. The elders told him it had been dipped in human blood, taken from an enemy killed in a raid decades earlier. It binds the spirit, one elder told him. It gives him memory. After that, only animal blood was used, black rooster, goat, or sometimes dog. Human blood was only for the consecration, never for feeding it. Before battle, Mabala knelt before the pot. He pressed his forehead to the leopard skin and whispered, "Grandfather, walk with me. Let my spear find its mark. Let my enemies fall asleep." The men who followed him said the naga changed him. They said when he walked, after speaking to it, he walked differently, like there was someone else beside him. Missionaries who visited the region wrote that Mabala's naga was feared even by his own warriors. One missionary wrote, "They believe the pot sees them. They believe it knows betrayal." There was a raid in 1889, remembered in the village songs. Mabala led his men through the forest at night, carrying his naga wrapped in cloth. When the enemy camp was found, he placed the pot on the ground. He fed it rooster's blood. The men swore the pot made a sound, something like a breath, something like a sigh. Mabala threw his spear, and the first man fell. The second fell before he could shout. The third dropped his weapon and ran. The warriors said the naga made the enemies slow, that their legs forgot how to move. Whether this was magic or fear, no one questioned it. Mabala died of fever in a rainy season. His men buried the Naga with him, sealing it in the earth, so the spirit would not wander. The elders said the pot returned to the soil, and that no one should ever dig it up. They said that the spirit had done enough work, and that death magic should not be used twice. An anthropologist, Wyatt McGaffey, later wrote that the Naga was a container of power, a living force, and that the bones were the materials through which the dead continued to act. That it was exactly what Mabala believed, that it is what his men believed. And that is why the pot was buried, because some spirits should not be kept alive forever. These were recorded in McGaffey's book, Religion and Society of Central Africa, and also in journal entries by missionaries in that region. But to the modern world, today we would never believe such things. They certainly can't happen in the West, except that maybe they did. I want to take you to the late 1990s in Florida. Now, the Naga can be used for many things. In Miami, the detectives still talk about the house on 8th Street, the one with the boarded windows and the smell of blood in the walls. It was a gang house, not the kind with the guns that stacked up in closets and cash under the floorboards. This house had a room with candles burned down to nubs, cigarette butts scattered across the floor, and a clay pot in the center of the room filled with bones, iron, dirt, and dried blood. The men who lived there believed the pot made them invisible. They were not fools. They were not children. They were men who had grown up hearing the stories from Cuba, Haiti, or the Dominican Republic, stories of the Palomambo or the Naga, of spirits bound to pots that could protect or kill. One of them, a man named Lewis, would later tell the police, "My uncle had one, the pots. He said it saved his life. Why wouldn't it save mine?" The pot in the Miami house contained human bones, taken from a cemetery during Halil, and animal blood, mostly rooster. Detectives would find dried blood in the rim and in a dark stain on the bottom of the bowl, and they would later have it tested, and it was confirmed to be human blood, likely used during its consecration. There was railroad spikes, coins, sticks, and carved wooden figures with a face scorched by candle flames. The men fed the pot before robberies. They poured rum over the bones, blew cigar smoke into the pot, and dripped rooster's blood onto the carved figure. They believed the spirit inside, sometimes called Nisaki or Mumpo, would protect them. One detective told the Miami Herald they believed the spirits made them invisible. Lewis said the pot watched over them, that bullets could not find them. He said the pot had a name, but he would not speak it. He said, "You don't say its name unless you're feeding it." In 1997, the gang had been on a robbery spree. And this is the story of their last robbery. The rest of the robberies, they only know they did because the men confessed to them. You'll understand in just a minute. This robbery was at a bank in Coral Gables, Florida. Before entering, they carried small cloth bundles, grave dirt, iron filings, and the slivers of bone tucked into their pockets. They believed these bundles would confuse the guards and blind the cameras. One robber later said, "The pot walks with us. It hides us." They were caught because one of the bundles fell out of a pocket during the escape. A witness picked it up thinking it was trash, but handed it to the police. The detectives recognized it immediately because they had dealt with Nagas before. They had seen these bundles in other ritual cases. They traced the cloth that led them back to the 8th Street house. When the FBI raided the house, they found the Naga in the center of the ritual room. Inside were human bones, animal bones, iron nails, railroad spikes, grave dirt, coins, and that bloody residue. The pot was warm. The detective would later say they thought the pot made them untouchable. They thought it made them gods. But belief does not stop a warrant. Belief does not stop fingerprints. Belief does not stop a witness from remembering a face. The men were arrested, the pot was seized, and the spirit inside, if there was one, was left in the evidence room until the trial, silent. But consider this. All of this happened because one man had desecrated the bundle by dropping it to the floor, insulting the Naga, and allowing the others to see. Or did it? In multiple other robberies, nobody could offer any evidence. Nobody saw anything. Somehow the camera angles were wrong. Everything just didn't make any sense. And in the only robbery where one of the bundles was dropped, lost, treated casually, it is the thing that led to their demise. Interesting story, isn't it?
Curious, at least.
I find it fascinating. This next story is about the Hand of Glory. So I came across the first reference to the Hand of Glory when I was 10 years old. And in a book from the Weekly Reader Book Club, there was a collection of ghost stories, little thin book with a green cover. I can still see the picture. There's a young woman with her hair braided, looking like she's in her nightgown, and this hand laying on a table with a light candle in the middle of it. You'll find this originates in England, France, Germany, and the Netherlands in the 15th century. It is to put the entire household to sleep, to paralyze those awake, to silence the dog, to unlock the doors, to allow thieves to rob a house without resistance. Our first story takes place in 1797. The inn at Spatel, the night the house slept. At the inn in Spatel on Stanmore Common, there has always been a place where travelers felt watched. The moor around is a black ocean of heather and wind, and the locals said the inn stood at a crossing place, a patch of land where the dead walked more easily than the living. Thomas Ray, the innkeeper, never believed that talk, but his wife did. She said the air always felt too still, as if the house were listening. And on a night in 1797, a stranger arrived just after dark. He wore a cloak that smelled of grave soil. Thomas noticed it when he poured the man his ale. The stranger drank without speaking, his eyes fixed on the fire. And when he left, Thomas felt a prickling along his spine, as though something was wrong, but he could not tell you what. Hours went by, and when the inn had gone silent, the stranger returned. He did not knock. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, with something wrapped in a cloth in his hand. Thomas's wife, who slept tightly, heard the door creak. She rose, walked into the hallway, and saw the man standing in the center of the room. What he held in his hand was a shriveled, blackened hand, upright like a lantern, and in the palm, a candle made of human fat. Its flame burned with a cold, unnatural glow. The fingers were stiff, curled slightly upward as if reaching for something. She tried to scream, but her voice died. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor. She was not able to move. Later she would say, "I felt like my bones forgot themselves." The man whispered an incantation, words preserved decades later by folklorist William Henderson. "Let those who are asleep be asleep, and those who are awake be awake." The inn fell completely silent. Every sleeper remained asleep. Every awake person remained frozen. Thomas Ray, halfway up the stairs, felt his body stiffen. He could see the man moving through the room. He could see him opening drawers, lifting purses, taking coins from a strong box. But he could not lift a finger to stop him. His breath came shallow, as if the air itself resisted him. The thief moved with a calm precision. He carried the hand of glory like a lantern. Wherever the light touched, silence deepened. Even the dogs outside lay motionless, their eyes open, but their bodies still. But one person resisted, Mary, the servant girl who had been awakened when the man entered. She felt the paralysis wash over her, but she forced herself to slump to the floor and pretend to sleep. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the thief move from room to room, passing her in the hallway. She saw him take the innkeeper's purse, a traveler's coins, the silver cup from the mantel. She saw the flame flicker when he passed near the hearth. She remembered an old tale her grandmother had told her, that the hand of glory could be extinguished only with milk. Water would not touch it, wine would not dim it, only milk. Mary crawled toward the kitchen, her limbs heavy as stone. She reached for the milk jug and dragged it to the floor and poured it over the burning hand when he came close to see if she could move. The flame hissed, the paralysis broke. Thomas shouted. The thief turned startled and fled into the night, leaving the hand of glory on the floor. The fingers curled like a dead spider, and Thomas later told the magistrates, "I saw him clear as day, and I could not move a muscle." The magistrate wrote it down, though he did not believe any of it, but Henderson did, and so did the people of the Stanmore Common, who said the inn had been touched by death magic, the kind thieves used when they wanted a house to stay asleep forever. These are from notes taken by Henderson on the folklore of the northern counties of England. It's an Oxford reference. And also from the Hand of Glory from Whitby Museum, where they have one on display. Now I want to go to the 1970s in Yorkshire. By the 1970s, people said the old magic was dead. They said the Hand of Glory was a fairy tale story children were told, a relic from a time when thieves believed in charms and the dead were feared more than the living. But in Yorkshire, on Black Dog Lane, apparently old magic waited. Edwin Lister bought the cottage in 1974. It was a small stone house with boarded windows and a hearth that smelled faintly of soot and of something else, something off, different. The neighbors told him the cottage had belonged to a man by the name of Harrow, a recluse who had been arrested once for grave robbing. They said Harrow had kept things he should not have kept. Edwin laughed it off. Superstitions. The first night he slept there, he woke to the smell of something he could not place, like burning tallow, old dirt, something like the inside of a crypt, or at least what he imagined it would smell like. He found absolutely nothing. But the smell returned the next night and the next. Edwin began to hear footsteps in the hallway at night, soft and deliberate. He told himself it was a house settling. He told himself it was the wind, but the footsteps grew bolder. One evening, while preparing the hearth, Edwin found a loose stone. Behind it was a wooden box, and within it, wrapped in cloth, was a hand, shriveled, blackened hand, fingers stiff, nails yellowed. The palm was hollowed as if it meant to hold something. A candle, perhaps? Edwin felt a wave of nausea. He dropped the box and stepped away. That night, the smell returned, stronger, sharper. Edwin woke to the sound of footsteps. He stepped into the hallway. The air was heavy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. He saw a man standing near the hearth, tall, thin, clothing decades out of date. The man held the Hand of Glory in his right hand, though no candle burned in the palm. The fingers glowed slightly, as if from within. Edwin tried to speak, but his voice failed him. His limbs stiffened. He felt himself sinking to the floor, unable to make his legs stiffen and hold his body. Paralysis was not total. He could breathe. He could blink. He could not stand. The man moved through the house, touching objects, lifting things out of drawers, examining Edwin's belongings. Edwin realized the man was not a ghost. He was flesh and blood, a thief, a man who had found the Hand of Glory and believed in its power. Later, Edwin would tell the police, "He looked at me. He knew I could not move." The thief took Edwin's wallet, his watch, his cash, and the tin on the mantel. He moved with calm confidence, as if he had done this many times. Edwin remembered something he had read in a book about Whitby Museum's hand of glory specimen. He remembered the line, "The candle can only be put out with milk." He crawled inch by inch toward the kitchen, his limbs feeling like stone. He reached for the milk jug and dragged it across the floor and flung it toward the thief. Milk splashed across the hand of glory, and the glow died. The paralysis broke. Edwin lunged to his feet. The thief fled through the door, dropping the hand on the floor. Police found footprints leading into the woods, but the man was never caught. And the hand of glory was taken by Whitby Museum, where curators would compare it to the existing specimen. One curator would later say, "It should not even exist, but here it is." And Edwin never slept in that cottage again. He sold it within the year, and the people of Whitby whispered that the old magic had not died, that it was still there within the hand, waiting to be let loose again. Interesting, correct?
Yes. Short answer, yes. I mean,
Yes.
listening to all of these, and you know me, I like to look at things from an analytical standpoint. So thinking that, well, think back to Middle Ages, or people who were less enlightened, let's say. So I mean, if you showed them like a Bic lighter, they would think that that was magic, just something that's out of the realm of their comprehension. So I kind of went into this episode thinking the same kind of thing, that maybe there are some things that are just more technologically advanced that we can't come up with. I mean, it's a lot easier now that there's a lot of science fiction around. Yeah, but these I can't explain these away, as advanced science or something like that. They're just too bizarre.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things I wanted to propose, is that there is magic out there, that there are things. If there's good things, there's bad things. And if there's, positive things, there's negative things. Everything has a yin and a yang to it, a good and a bad to it. So there are things we don't understand, and we have comforted ourselves not with whispers of faith, but with the word science. But this isn't science. This is alchemy. This is magic. This is something that science doesn't even dream of. Go on to the next story. These are something called thieves' lights. So in William Shakespeare's Macbeth, there is a line that's said by the Weird Sisters. It's part of a spell, and it's "Finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab." I could do the entire thing. That has always fascinated me. We're going to understand why the finger of a birth strangled babe is so important. It's a darker cousin of the hand of glory, not made by a hanged man's hand, but the fingers of a baby unbaptized, either because it died before baptismal or it was born dead. Often, the candle that would go with it, or the light that would go with it, would be made from the fat of murdered children. It sounds insane, but please understand, in a different time frame, you're talking about a completely different set of beings. So we're looking at the early 1700s for this particular first story. And I want you to understand that in this time period, the British government and the church was gathering up the poor, whether they were small children or the elderly or whatever, and selling them to ship's captains and sending them to the New World to be slaves on tobacco plantations and cotton plantations. Human beings were not thought of the way they are today. You have the story of the Red Sisters, who literally were butchering children and selling meat pies. This is a totally different mindset. You have to factor in, because you're sitting there in your nice, comfy home listening to this podcast going, "That's insane. Nobody would do that." But they did all kinds of horrendous things that we would find highly offensive today. So here we go. Bavaria, 1734. In the winter of 1734, the miller's house in the village of Obermachu stood at the edge of the forest, its wheel frozen, the windows shuddered against the cold. The miller, Hans Ritzer, was a man who trusted the weight of grain more than the weight of prayer. He believed in work, not spirits. But his wife, Martha, believed in everything: ghosts, saints, curses, old stories whispered by grandmothers. On a night when the snow fell in sheets, the river groaned under the ice. A pair of thieves approached the miller's house. They were brothers, Johann and Lucas Schreiber, men known for their cruelty. They had once been altar boys, but something had turned in them. They believed in a kind of magic that priests feared to name. Johann carried a candle wrapped in cloth. Lucas carried a small wooden box. Inside the box was a finger, the finger of an infant who had died before baptism. The brothers had stolen it from the graveyard, digging in the dark, whispering prayers they did not understand. They believed the finger held a kind of power. Innocence inverted, purity turned to paralysis. Johann lit the candle. The bloom was blue as the flame danced, and Lucas placed the infant's finger beside it. The flame brightened. They whispered the words they learned from a tattered grimoire. Let the house forget its waking. Let the sleepers sink deeper. Let the living be still. The miller's house went quiet. The dogs outside laid down, their bodies stiffened. The chickens in the coop stopped moving, and inside Hans Ritter felt his own limbs grow heavy. He tried to raise from his chair, but his muscles refused him. Marta, who had been sewing beside the fire, felt her needle slip from her fingers. She tried to call out, but her voice died in her throat. The thieves entered the house. Johann held the candle. Lucas carried high the finger. They moved through the rooms, opening drawers, lifting coins, taking what they wished. Hans watched them, helpless, his breath shallow. Marta's eyes filled with tears, but she could not move to wipe them from her eyes. The thieves believed the magic worked because the infant had died without baptism, because the soul was untethered, neither claimed by heaven nor protected by ritual. They believed they had stolen not just a finger, but the spirit of the child. But Marta had been raised in old stories. She knew something the thieves did not. She remembered her grandmother saying, "Milk breaks the sleep of the dead." With every ounce of strength she had felt left, Marta dragged herself toward the kitchen, her limbs feeling like stone, her breath in gasps. She tipped over the milk jug, trying to reach for it, and the milk spilled across the floor. It touched the foot of the man carrying the candle, and as he stepped into it, the paralysis loosened. Hans surged to his feet. The thieves turned, startled. Johann dropped the candle. Lucas dropped the finger, and they fled into the snow, leaving the relics behind. The miller's wife would tell the priest later, "It was not the thieves who froze us, it was the dead child." The priest refused to write it down, but the villagers remembered, and they said that the brothers had been touched by a kind of magic that should never be messed with. 1998, the basement in Prague, the blue flame that should not have burned. In 1998, the Prague police raided the basement in Zoab after neighbors reported strange lights flickering through the windows in the night. The basement belonged to a man by the name of Pavel Havelaka, a petty criminal who had a history of burglary and graveyard theft. He was not a sorcerer. He was not a scholar of the occult. He was a man who believed in shortcuts, especially shortcuts that got him money. When the police entered the basement, they found a table covered with old books, melted candles, and small glass jars, and in one, something that was pale and shriveled. The officers thought it was a piece of animal bone, but it turned out to be the finger of an infant stolen from a local cemetery. Pavel had learned about the thieves' lights from a book he had bought at a flea market, a 19th century German grimoire that described how candles made from infant fat or a finger could stupefy households and render the living motionless. He believed it. He wanted to test it. He had tried to make a candle from the finger, but lacked the skill. Instead, he placed the finger beside the candle that he had made using ordinary wax and whispered incantations he had memorized. Let the house forget the waking. He claimed the flame turned blue, He claimed the air grew heavy. He claimed he felt a presence. He used the relic during a burglary in Vino Harde. He lit the candle. He placed the finger beside it. He whispered the words. The homeowner, an elderly woman, later told the police, "I saw him, the thief. I could not move. I could not even scream. I knew not what was wrong with me." She watched Pavel take her jewelry box, her cash, her silverware. She watched him walk through her home as if he owned it. She said the flame of the candle glowed like blue ice. Pavel believed the magic had worked. He believed the infant spirit had been bound to the finger. He believed he had stolen not just a relic, but a soul. He was caught because when he returned to the same house 2 weeks later, the woman had installed a camera. The footage shows Pavel lighting the candle, placing the finger beside it, and whispering the incantation. The police arrested him in the basement of his own home, the candle still on the table, the finger in the jar. He thought he had found a way to freeze people. He thought he had found a way to stop time, an officer would say. He added and he said, well, maybe he did, at least for a bit. The relic was taken to the police evidence room, the jar sealed, the finger never claimed, and the old stories of thieves' lights are whispered still in Bavaria, Austria, and the Netherlands. And the whispers have started again in Prague because some magic does not die. It only waits for someone foolish enough to believe in it. An interesting story. And it's interesting because no matter where you go with this particular story, it's always the same solution. And we're going to talk about the next thing is a mandrake lamp. These lamps are called wealth lamps, sleep lamps, death magic. You'll find them in France, England, Germany, and the Mediterranean basin. Animal blood is used in consecration, human blood rarely, but there are some documented in grimoires, books of magic, for those who don't know what a grimoire is. It is to shine an unnatural light, attracting wealth. I'm going to share this story and then we'll go on. This is in France, 1722. In the limestone hills above the village, the villagers believed the mandrake was not just a plant, but a child of the earth, half root, half human, born with blood when that's had spilled. They said it grew under the gallows, under execution scaffolds, under the places where men died violently. They said that the roots screamed when pulled from the ground, and the scream could kill a man or drive him mad. In 1722, a man by the name of Etienne Bouat lived alone in a stone hut above the river. He was a cooper by trade. That means he made barrel staves. But he had lost his wife and child to fever, and something in him had broken. He began to believe that the world owed him wealth, that the old magic could give it to him. He had heard of the mandrake lamp that was described in the French grimoire, and he sought it out, promising that it would give him riches. He read the book. It shineth by night all together like a lamp. Etienne believed it. He believed it completely. He went to the old gallows hill after dusk carrying a black dog on a rope. The dog was meant to pull the root, but the scream would kill the animal instead of the man. Etienne pulled at the base of the mandrake, whispering prayers as he twisted it into something darker. And when the root let loose, he tied the rope around it and urged the dog to pull forward. The dog pulled, the root tore free, and it took the toll of a life. You see, that's why it was under the gallows. It sucked up a life to feed itself. In this instance, he connected it to the dog, and the dog fell dead. Etienne carried the mandrake home. It looked like a tiny human hand, arms, legs, a head, all twisted and pale. He washed it in wine, he wrapped it in linen, and placed it in a clay pot. He fed it goat's blood, believing the blood would wake the spirit inside. At night, he placed the mandrake on his table and whispered, "Shine for me, bring me gold." The villagers said they saw the strange light glowing through his window, blue, faint, like moonlight trapped in a jar. They said the glow moved, pulsed, breathed. Etienne claimed the mandrake would whisper to him, telling him where the coins were hidden, where travelers kept their purses, where merchants buried savings, and he began to steal. Small things at first, then larger things. He robbed a merchant on the road, claiming the mandrake had showed him the man's purse in a dream. He broke into a farmhouse saying the mandrake had shone brighter when he passed that door. He believed the root was alive, that it wanted to help him, that it wanted the blood. But the mandrake glow changed. It grew dim. It flickered, and Etienne panicked. He fed it more goat's blood, the rooster's blood, and then in desperation, he pricked his own finger and fed it human blood. The mandrake brightened. It shone like a lantern. But the villagers had begun to whisper. They said Etienne had been seen carrying a root that looked like a child. They said he had been seen digging near the gallows. They said he had been seen talking to himself, answering voices no one else could hear. And one night, Etienne's hut caught fire. Flames rose fast, unnaturally fast, as if fed by oils. The villagers found him inside, clutching the mandrake, his face twisted in terror. The root had burned black. The glow was gone. The priest refused to bury the mandrake. He said it was never meant to be touched, and the villagers agreed. They said Etienne had fed something that should not have been fed to it, his own blood. So now we're going to go to 1983 in Marseille, in France. In 1983, a man by the name of Lucien Dalmas rented a small apartment in Marseille, a narrow room above a butcher's shop that smelled of salt and smoke. Lucien was a quiet man, a night worker at the docks, someone who kept to himself. But he had a fascination with old magic, with grimoires, with charms and relics. He collected them like people collected stamps. One day at a flea market near the port, he found a mandrake root, dried, twisted, shaped like a tiny human hand. The seller claimed it had been dug up near the execution site in Provence. Lucien bought it without any hesitation. He took it home, he washed it in wine, and placed it in a ceramic bowl. He whispered to it the way he had read in the grimoire. He fed the root rooster's blood, believing the blood would wake the root. He lit a candle and sat beside it waiting, and nothing happened. Not at first. But after midnight, Lucien saw a faint glow, blue, soft, and pulsing. He leaned closer. The mandrake seemed to breathe. He felt a warmth on his face, as if the root were exhaling. He whispered, "Show me what I need." The glow brightened, and Lucien felt a strange calm. He felt as if the room had grown larger, as if the walls had moved away from him. He began to use the mandrake as a lamp. He carried it through the apartment at night. He said it showed him things, lost objects, forgotten coins, hidden papers. But the glow grew stronger, too strong. Neighbors complained about a blue light that shone through Lucien's window late at night, flickering like flames. They said it made them uneasy, that it felt wrong, that it was like something alive. Lucien stopped sleeping. He spent his nights staring at the mandrake, whispering to it, feeding it blood, pricking his own finger to give it human's blood, drip by drip upon the root. He said the root needed that to stay alive. And one night the butcher downstairs heard screaming. He ran upstairs and found Lucien on the floor, clutching the mandrake. The root, so bright it lit the entire room. Lucien's eyes were wide, terrified, and he whispered, "It won't go out anymore." The butcher tried to take the root from him, but Lucien held it tight. The glow dimmed only when the butcher threw a bucket of milk over it, an old superstition he remembered. The police arrived. They found the mandrake burned black. Its glow was gone, and Lucien was taken to the hospital trembling, unable to explain what had happened. The mandrake was confiscated. The officers refused to keep it in the evidence room. They sent it to a museum where the curator said, "It should not shine, but some nights it does." Lucien never returned to his apartment. He left Marseille within the year, and the butcher told anyone who would listen that the old magic isn't dead. It's only waiting for someone to believe. Interesting?
Very much.
So, as I said, finger or birth string or babe. I'm going to talk about a couple more such stories. This is the story from 1651. It's called The Bone in the Black Bag. Apologize. From the midwife of Glencarn. In the parish of Glencarn, the midwife Elspeth Murrell was known for her quiet hands and her strange knowledge. She could stop bleeding with a whisper, ease a fever with a poultice, calm a crying infant with a touch. But the villagers knew she knew other things too, things she never spoke of, things she had learned from her grandmother, who had been burned as a witch in 1612. Elspeth lived alone in a stone cottage near the river. She kept a black bag under her bed, tied with a cord, and never opened in the daylight. The villagers said she carried it when she walked at night, and that she never let anyone touch it. In the winter of 1651, a child was born in the village, a boy, small and sickly. He lived only a few hours, and the mother screamed when he died, and the father cursed God. Elspeth washed the child's body, wrapped it in linen, and prepared it for the burial. But she did something evil, something awful first. She took a single finger bone, tucked the child's hand under the blanket, and tied it there. She believed the child's spirit, unclaimed because it was not blessed or baptized, would now be hers, and that bone held a kind of raw, dangerous power, one she had heard about from her grandmother. Elspeth dried the bone over the hearth, wrapped it in a cloth, and placed it in the black bag. She fed it a drop of her own blood daily, believing the blood would bind the spirit to her. And weeks later, a wealthy farmer named Duncan Kerr came to her cottage. He said his house was cursed, his cattle sickened, his wife could not sleep, his children woke screaming. He begged Elspeth for help. She agreed, but she asked for payment, not coin, not food. She asked for silence. She walked to Kerr's farmhouse at dusk. She carried the black bag inside with the bone. She placed the bone on the hearthstone and whispered, "Little one, wake up. Little one, listen. Little one, bind what troubles this house." The air inside grew heavy. The fire dimmed. The children stopped crying. The cattle quieted. Elspeth felt the presence of the child, small, cold, curious. She felt it move through the house like a breath. She felt it settle in the rafters, watching. The curse was broken. The house was still. But Kerr's wife saw Elspeth place the bone back in the bag. She saw the way Elspeth's hands trembled. She saw the way the midwife whispered to the bone as if soothing a restless child. She told the minister told the magistrate arrested Elspeth. During questioning, she said, "I did not kill the child, I only borrowed what death had left behind." The magistrate wrote down those words. The minister called it blasphemy. The villagers called it witchcraft. Elspeth was hanged in the spring, her black bag burned, but the Kerr children said they still heard the footsteps in the rafters at night. Small, soft, like a child walking. In Germany in 2007, a landlord renovating an old apartment building in Dresden found something strange behind a crumbling plaster wall. A cloth bundle tied with twine. Inside was a small bone, pale, delicate, unmistakably human. The landlord called the police thinking it might be evidence from a crime. It was, but not what he expected. The tenant who lived in the apartment, a man by the name of Matthias Kruger, had disappeared months earlier. He was a quiet man, a security guard, someone who kept to himself, but his neighbors said he had strange habits. He burned the candles at odd hours. He didn't use the electric lighting. He whispered in the hallway. He left bowls of milk outside his door. The police searched the apartment and they found books on German folklore. They found notes written in Matthias's hand. Notes about thieves, lights, corpse, fat candles, and infant bones used in necromancy. One note said, "The bone of an unbaptized child binds the restless spirit. It listens, it obeys." Another line in his note said, "The bone must be fed with blood." The police found a dried smear of human blood on the cloth bundle. Matthias had been obsessed with the 1700s grimoire and how it described the bone of a murdered or unbaptized infant that could be used to paralyze victims, silence households, summon spirits. He believed the bone he found, likely unearthed in a construction site, held such a power. The neighbors reported strange events, flickering lights, doors opening on their own, a child's cry heard in the hallway at night. And one neighbor said, he talked to it. He said it answered. Matthias vanished in November. His belongings remained. The bone remained. The police never found him, but the forensic report confirmed that the bone belonged to an infant who had died violently sometime in the 1600s. At least that's what they wrote. The police officers wrote, Matthias believed the bone was alive. The landlord sealed the wall. The apartment was never rented again, and the neighbors said the hallway still felt cold at night, as if something small and restless was still there. So we've talked a little bit about corpse fat candles. I'm going to tell you a couple stories of that. So these candles are like the oldest version of the Hand of Glory. This first one takes place in France in 1682. Paris was a city of shadows, alleys where thieves whispered, cellars where sorcerers worked, and execution yards where the dead were believed to linger. The gibbet was the darkest place of all. Bodies hung there for days, sometimes weeks, until the crows ripped them clean. People said the air around the gallows was thick with spirits, that the soil itself remembered every death. A man named Armand Delatour worked as a night watchman at the Rue de Saint-Germain. He was not a cruel man, but he was desperate. His wife was sick, his debts heavy. He believed the world had cheated him. He heard stories of corpse fat candles, of tallow rendered from the fat of executed criminals, some used by thieves to silence households. He believed the stories. He believed them completely. One night, Armand went to the gallows with a knife and a sack. He waited until the guards were gone, then climbed the scaffold and cut a fat strip from the thigh of a man who had been hanged that morning. The body was still warm. Armand gagged, but he did not stop. He carried the fat home, melted it over low fires, and poured it into a mold. The candle that formed was pale, almost translucent. It smelled faintly of iron. Armand whispered, "You died in chains. Help me break my chains." He believed the candle held the dead man's spirit, angry, restless, eager to act. A week later, Armand used the candle during a burglary at the Rue Saint-Germain. He lit the candle outside the door of a wealthy merchant's home. The flame burned blue, steady, silent. Armand felt the air grow heavy, as if the house itself was asleep. He touched the door, and it was suddenly unlocked. He stepped inside. The dog lay motionless by the fire, the servants in a dead sleep, their breath slow and even. Armand moved through the house, taking coins, jewelry, silver. He felt a strange calm, as if someone walked beside him. And he whispered to the candle, "Keep them sleeping." The flame flickered, the house grew quiet. The merchant's daughter, a child of 12, awoke. She saw Armand go through the hallway, the candle in his hand. She felt her limbs grow heavy, but she forced herself to try to crawl and fell out of bed. Beside her was a cup, still half full of milk, and when she fell, the cup clattered to the floor, causing his attention. He entered the room and accidentally stepped in the milk. Candle hissed. The spell broke. Armand froze, not with magic, but with terror. The little girl began to scream, and the servants awoke. Armand fled into the street, dropping the candle. 2 days later, he was caught, and during questioning, he said, "The dead man helped me. He opened the door." The magistrate wrote down his words, though he did not necessarily believe them. But the girl did. So did the neighbors, who said the candle had burned with a flame that was so blue it could not have existed. One last story of this, and we'll move on. This story took place in Germany in 1991. It was after the fall of the Berlin Wall. The small city was filled with abandoned buildings, old factories, empty flats, forgotten basements. In one of those flats lived a man by the name of Dietrich Schnitz. a former butcher who had lost his job and drifted into petty crimes. Dieter was fascinated by old magic, the German magic, witch trials, tales of necromancy. He found a book that had a story about a corpse-fat candle, and he decided that he needed to make one. He became obsessed by it. He believed the candle would give him power. He believed it would make him invisible. He went to an abandoned hospital in the outskirts of town, one that had been used during the war, where there were bodies that had been stored in the basement, and he found a slab with a corpse on which a corpse had once laid. He scraped a small amount of fat from the crack of the stone, old, dried, and yellowed. He melted it at home and mixed it with wax. He poured it into a mold. The candle smelt faintly of rot. "Wake, help me," he whispered to the candle. He lit the candle during a burglary, and the flame burned blue. The air was heavy. The homeowner, an elderly man, told the police later, "I saw him come into my room. I could not move." Dieter moved through the flat, taking money, jewelry, anything he could. He felt a strange calm, as if he were not alone. He believed the candle held the spirit of someone who had died, angry, restless. The candle did something Dieter did not expect. It grew brighter, too bright. The flame rose, tall and thin, like a finger of blue fire. It did not go out. Dieter panicked when he tried to blow it out. He tried to pinch it out, tried to smother it with cloth, and nothing worked. The elderly man, realizing his house was about to be set on fire by this crazy blue candle, whispered through stiff lips, "Pour milk, pour milk." Dieter ran to the kitchen. He was afraid that this had escaped his grasp, that he had done something to free the spirit, and so he poured water over the candle. It hissed and spit, but did not go out. And then he ran to the refrigerator and pulled out some milk and threw it onto the candle. The spell broke, and Dieter fled, dropping the candle. He was caught because he had returned to the same building 2 nights later, believing the candle had chosen him. And during questioning, he said it wouldn't go out. It wanted more. It wanted me to get more than just the jewelry. It wanted me to take the man while he was alive. The candle was taken to an evidence room, but the police eventually removed it. They sent it to a museum, stating that they did not want it in the building. They saw flickering lights. They heard whispers. They said it should not burn blue, but it did. Now, we're nearly at the end of this particular episode. I have a part 2 to this one, and we're going to go into many other themes. Not only do human remains have power, but there are many other things that do as well. And I cannot wait to share these stories with you next time. I hope you've enjoyed them. I hope they make you think twice about the things you read in books. Oh, and the things you find in graveyards. With that, I'm going to say good night.